So Dan, you said you've known people who were married to a Machiavellian for 10 years before they found out
Yes.
because that's the patient waiting game of the Machiavellian. I hear
hmm
people say that sort of thing about narcissists and psychopaths. So are we misdiagnosing if we, so to speak, I mean, we don't necessarily diagnose unless we're medical, but, say
Right.
that if someone can play that long a game?
Very often that is the case. People will say they were manipulative, they were callous, they didn't feel anything, they were out for my 4K, my retirement, my money, my whatever. Psychopath. Doesn't sound like it to me. Now, as it is very, very possible, depending on what level of vigilance you had, depending on where your radar were at the beginning of the relationship and what red flags you were looking for, it's very likely a narcissistic person could play out that relationship for 10 years and you not really realize the full gravity of what you were in until much later. But that's a different mechanism, right? Narcissistic individuals very often use that charm and that you're never going to find somebody as good as me and that unrealistic sense of superiority. And then, my ship's coming in very soon. If you leave me now, when I become a multimillionaire, you're gonna feel like an idiot. That's a different mechanism. The Machiavellian plays the benign. They don't manipulate overtly with those types of tactics. They'll just lie in wait and they'll play a very humble, normal appearing typical hand and then strike when it's advantageous. And psychopathic individuals, yeah, again, depending on if you're not recognized and educated in these traits, you may miss the red flags of duplicity and things like that. So it's possible that person that he was talking about that he was married to was narcissistic and didn't realize it for 10 years because of just a lack of awareness about the types of traits and the ways they manipulate. But if they were aware of how all these types of things and they were just really the wool was pulled over their eyes and they were betrayed at an opportune moment, it's very unlikely you were dealing with narcissistic or psychopathic individuals because there's telltale signs that would leak. Somebody who really keeps it together, duplicitous, strategic. Yeah, you're probably dealing with Machiavellian. So I can't tell for sure. It really depends on how aware they are of the different traits and the red flags. But I would say that most often, if they kept it really under the radar, it's Machiavellianism. Yeah. And I'd say the same thing for corporate leaders. A lot of people say, oh, these psychopathic CEOs.
Yeah.
I don't think there's very many psychopathic CEOs. There's a paper published by Paul Babiak, Craig Newman, and Robert Hare in 2010 that looked at the psychopathy checklist revised among 203 rising executives in the business world. And what they found was the only thing that moved their career forward of those four components they diagnosed in psychopathy was the interpersonal manipulation component, which is shared between Machiavellianism and psychopathy. What they found was that higher the interpersonal manipulation factor, the more they received positive and advancing reviews of their career. But what that giveth, the reckless and antisocial nature of psychopathy taketh away, and that compromised their ability to advance and move forward and get positive reviews. So if you look at manipulation shared by Machiavellianism and psychopathy, but impulsivity and antisociality only shared by psychopathy and antithetical in a way to Machiavellianism, it makes sense that it's the Machiavellians that are rising to the top of these organizations and then wreaking havoc once they get there. Psychopaths don't have the self-control. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's less likely they're going to have the self-control to negotiate, build the coalitions, and strategically manipulate their way to the top.
Okay. So the so-called successful psychopaths, the ones who become CEOs and
Right.
things like that, you're saying that evidence from the paper by Paul Babiak, Robert Hare, the guys who wrote Snakes in Suits, Understanding and Surviving the Psychopaths in Your Office, the data actually suggests that what we're dealing with is most likely the Machiavellian.
More often than not, I'd say it's Machiavellianism. That's right. Is there such a thing as a successful psychopath where, there could be a thin sliver of real estate between a psychopath and a Machiavellian such that you don't have the cynical, misanthropic, cynical worldview that a Machiavellian has, and you don't have the impulsivity that a psychopath has. Instead, you have this superficial, glib, charming and manipulative person, but doesn't have the impulsivity. Is there something in there that we could call a successful psychopath that doesn't fit the category of Machiavellianism and doesn't fit the category of psychopathy? Maybe. But I would say most often the Machiavellian individual is the one who's displaying these environmental sensitivities, delay of gratification, and strategic qualities necessary to rise to the top. So I think more often than not, it was misinterpreted as being psychopathy when it was really Machiavellianism.
To go even deeper on these ideas, you can watch my full episode using the link in the description or the box on the screen.